Thanks for checking out the video. I just wanted to let you know that I recorded using the local setting on Zoom instead of the cloud setting on Zoom, thinking that would create a better editing experience, but that proved to be incorrect. So bear with us there. I think you'll still find the video pretty interesting. All right. I am here with Matthew Strother, who emailed me to ask me a bunch of questions about PKM. And I've lots of questions. And so I thought it would be fun to just record a quick video to kind of start from the talk about what PKM is, how we can think about setting up a workflow, and then talk about a specific workflow that Matthew read about on my website, and then go from there. So Matthew, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, I can. My name is Matthew Strother. I read How to Take Smart Notes maybe a couple years ago now, and was instantly struck by the revolutionary way of thinking about my note-taking, which up till that point existed in thousands of margins of books I wasn't returning to and dozens of notebooks I was never looking at again. So I have been very slowly and intermittently trying to set up a personal knowledge management system since then. But only in the last month kind of really rolled up the sleeves and said, it's time to get serious. So I'm somebody who's trying to use it for a writing project, an academic writing project. I know absolutely nothing about programming, and I actually emailed Maggie because I didn't even know how to identify a file path to use the shortcut that she had created. So that original conversation turned into me realizing I had a lot more questions for Maggie. So hopefully this will just be a useful chat for anybody who's kind of already on board the philosophy. I don't think we're going to get into why you should be Zettelkastening here. It's just sort of someone who's on board and excited to set it up for themselves. This might be useful for you.
Awesome. Yeah, so this is going to be pretty informal. I'm just going to share my screen, and then at some point Matthew will share his screen so we can just talk about setting up stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and share my Chrome here. So one of the first questions that Matthew had was basically, how do we think about setting up an academic workflow or an end-to-end note-taking workflow? So that made me immediately think, well, those are not necessarily the same. And one of the challenges with PKM is that there are lots of different workflows for the lots of different aspects of our lives. And one of the things that I think kind of captures this idea best is this thing by Nick Milo called the PKM Planet. So basically, Nick makes the argument that when we talk about PKM, we're actually talking about a lot of different things. And it's really helpful to kind of drill down to the specific things that we're actually trying to do. And it could be all of these, but if we know which one we're doing, then we can kind of focus our workflows accordingly. So basically idea management, sense making, connecting, developing ideas. So that's Zettelkasten for sure. Writing. So a lot of different fields are going to do writing. That could be academic writing. That could be writing copy for a website, that kind of thing. Productivity, understanding, developing, advancing projects and goals. So, for example, if you've heard of Tiago Forte's Para workflow or GTD, then we have skill management. So things like deliberate practice, spaced repetition, relationship management. So that might be something like a CRM kind of thing that you could use for your own life. And then memory management, collecting knowledge using and developing memory. So that's, I guess, another example of how you could kind of think about using spaced repetition. So for me, how I would kind of fit in on this is I think I'm kind of big on this half of the pie here. I don't really do that much of this half of the pie, although I have played around with like using Remnote, which is this note-taking app that's really good for spaced repetition, to like track games that I play in chess, mostly just for fun. But I do kind of like have my academic workflow and then my personal writing and thinking workflow. So I'm kind of over on this part of the pie. What part of the pie do you think that you are in?
Yeah, I'm in the same half of the pie for sure. And I think that's what we'll talk about today. Although I would sneak an extra slice of pie into the combo for memory management, because a separate question for me, which is not urgent or particularly project related, is around developing a kind of personal Wikipedia where I am just reading books and making connections without necessarily wanting to turn it into something or having it be related to a project. I'm interested in how that memory management might exist alongside idea management without getting confused. So maybe we can kind of like glance at that as we move forward, but I think let's stay on the same half of the pie for the main bulk of the conversation.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Basically, before the call, we were talking about the idea of having something that maybe is more like a personal Wikipedia, so more like a reference guide than necessarily something that's about connecting unique ideas, which is usually what we think of as Zettelkasten is, and how to balance that. So does that capture what you said correctly?
Yeah, exactly. I think just to the extent that understanding and learning, especially people who pursue this world, talk about the importance of turning something that you have digested into your own thoughts. And to the extent that you have general knowledge aspirations, I think reading that isn't project related, that you nevertheless put in your own terms and say, what does this mean to me? What is this concept? What is this person? What was this historical date? It makes sense that just lives somewhere and builds its own connections over time. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I kind of had an idea so I thought we could use the Jamboard. What I thought would be interesting would be, I was going to just kind of do a general like PKM workflows overview for like an academic or personal note-taking thing, basically that half of the pie. But then I realized that we could also try to focus it a little bit on the specific project that you were doing. So can you talk about the specific project that you might be interested in working on?
Yeah, for sure. So I am basically looking to rewrite my master's thesis. My master's thesis, it's worth saying, suffered profoundly from not having a personal knowledge management system. It was a thesis actually on reading and writing practices in the 19th century university. In a way, it was weirdly about personal knowledge management back then and thinking through my own problems of personal knowledge management using this kind of historical mirror. I was writing about the young philosopher Nietzsche's critique of the university and the way that basically people are all reading way too much stuff and writing about really trivial things and never synthesizing their thoughts to ask bigger questions. So in a really tragic twist of irony, my own thesis sort of fell prey to the very problems Nietzsche was critiquing because I didn't have a great setup to organize my thoughts. I just had hundreds of Word documents, computer crashing all the time, notebooks disorganized. So that experience led me to want to set this system up and then use the system to return to that failed project and do it better the second time around. So I'm looking at setting up this workflow and then kind of starting from ground one again, going through the primary texts, taking notes in a more connected way, and letting those clusters of ideas organically build my thesis as opposed to just trying to impose a structure from the top down.
Okay, yeah, so that's helpful because that's kind of was going to be one of my questions was how you were thinking about approaching it. So it sounds like, you want to approach from bottom up, not top down. And also you want to make sure that you're focusing on synthesis, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's, kind of the idea here. And so I guess I would kind of think, okay, so we know we want to take a bottom-up approach, not a top-down approach, and something like the Zettelkasten approach is kind of one of the more obvious workflows that comes to mind when we talk about taking a bottom-up approach. And so if we think about that, we can think about how there's sort of a workflow, and often the way that people describe the workflow is actually in terms of the types of notes that you're taking. So we can make some stickies just to
Fleeting. Yep.
To show these fleeting literature notes. Yeah, so basically we would say, you know, we have fleeting, I don't remember how to do arrows on this, but fleeting literature permanent. So they kind of lead to each other. I guess I can't do arrows. I can kind of do it like this.
I'm happy with that. Oh, there you go. That's a nice arrow.
Okay, so basically the idea here is that since you're taking a bottom-up approach in the fleeting notes stage, so like here, what we're focusing on, another word we could kind of use for fleeting notes is capture. So you might see that used in a lot of places. So the idea here is like, we're kind of capturing, we're collecting. This is like a very early stage in the knowledge management system. And in fact, there might even be stuff that comes before over here, right? Which is like, you know, collecting papers.
Right.
You know?
Figuring out what you're going to read in the first place. Yeah, for sure.
So that kind of like might be over here.
I have a quick question, which you might be getting to, but it occurs to me looking at this structure, one road bump or thing I come up against is there are certain texts that you want to read and just take a note or a series of notes from and then move on. And there are certain kind of core primary / essential texts that you want a kind of one-stop shop reference point to say, not what were my ideas about Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, but what is the unfolding argument of the birth of tragedy? And I wonder if that is a kind of, if you see that as a particular kind of literature note or a particular kind of permanent note, that's not the, these are my ideas I've taken from this, but it's the, what was that book about again? Oh yeah, here's my take on the argument kind of broken down.
Yeah, so I think that's a hard thing to know, like right when you're, sometimes you know in advance that you're going to be reading something, you really want to discuss all aspects of it, and sometimes you just kind of want to get the gist. So this actually kind of introduces another useful set of terms, which are from How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren. So How to Read a Book basically talks about how there are lots of different kinds of reading that you can do. And so one of them is called inspectional reading. The other one is called analytical reading. And the last one is called syntopical.
I think this would be a good moment to bring in the Francis Bacon, the philosopher, not the painter's quote, some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested.
I like that. So let's like kind of define like what these are. I mean, you can kind of guess from inspectional. So inspectional is basically like systematic skimming.
Yeah.
So this is what you might do like when you're collecting papers or taking footing notes.
Yeah.
And like this is basically when you're just like, is this a thing that's even worth reading in more depth or not? And actually like the process of synthesizing everything and kind of going through this whole stage here is actually what syntopical reading is, which is basically using multiple texts to generate your own ideas. It's really answer your own questions to answer your own questions. So if you don't have this book on your list, I would definitely recommend it because the two of them actually go really well together. So we've read both of these in the Rome book clubs. So they really complement each other nicely. And so analytical, sorry, go ahead.
What's the second book? There's the Mortimer How to Read a Book, and then there's
How to Read a Book, and then this one is How to Take Smart Notes.
Oh, the
fleeting notes. Yeah. So using multiple texts to answer your own questions, and then analytical reading is, increasing. I can't type today. Increasing your understanding by coming to terms with the author. So that's basically digesting what the author is saying. And so syntopical reading, analytical reading could be part of syntopical reading. And in fact, syntopical reading is sort of something that encompasses analytical and inspectional reading. But so like you, as you're collecting papers and taking fleeting notes, you're kind of engaging in this systematic skimming and thinking about what questions you might ultimately want to answer. And then you kind of decide to what depth you do this analytical stage. So there's a lot of discussion / argument in the community about how to decide, like, once you take fleeting notes, how to go to literature notes, like whether you always do that, whether you only do that for certain things, whether you do that systematically, how you decide to do that. I think there's really hard, and it's also kind of personal, right? So I think you kind of have to trust your judgment. And if you say, like, I skimmed through this, I thought it would be helpful, but I actually just think there's like this one quote that's useful, and then you just leave it at that, that's probably fine, right? You kind of have to know for your project what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I see them, they're very different sort of modes of, I think of it as sort of mercenary reading, where you're there for your question, you're taking what you can use. And then there's a very different kind of generous reading where you're there to, as you say, to come to terms with the author, where it's like, I'm going to sit down with this book and make sure I really wrestle with these arguments to understand it in the author's terms before I bring my own mercenary. Okay, what is this for me? What can this do for me?
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it.
I guess as you get good at this, you can probably do both at the same time, but it seems to me that it's probably good to practice sort of choosing one or the other as you're getting used to this schematic approach.
Yeah, so kind of using one and the other, and then kind of thinking about it as this progressive step, and you don't always have to go to the end, right? It's kind of up to you to decide, like, this stage might be super generative or it might not be. And we can also kind of map like this stage kind of goes here. This kind of fits in here, and this fits in here. So they actually really complement each other really well.
That's nice. Yeah.
Okay, so does that like really overarching structure kind of make some sense?
It definitely does. It definitely does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the reason I wanted to start here was because we kind of have our overarching goal, which is that we want to rewrite the master's thesis. We have the approach, which is you want to take the bottom up and not the top down, and that you want to focus on synthesis. So you want to engage in these 4 steps, and you'll use these 3 techniques.
Nice.
So that's kind of the high level way to think about it. And then we can kind of drill in to each of these stages. We can kind of go with for what you think would make sense to talk about. I know we were thinking a lot about capture when we were talking before, so we might want to start there. But basically, at each step, you can kind of zoom in on that and just talk a lot about that step.
Yep.
So maybe it makes sense. Okay, so there's still the high level, like, how do you approach this in a tool agnostic way? And then there's the, okay, well, like, which tools do you actually use to do the thing?
Indeed.
So I'm trying to think about which one we want to go to next. I think we can talk about, like, with collecting, you really want to think about both how you get something into your system and then how you organize it. So maybe we want to start a new board. Let's try that. Collecting capture. So yeah, so I think with collecting capture, you really care about a couple things. You care about like getting things into the system. You care about like organizing the system, and then like getting things out of the system.
Yeah. I should say, just with respect to how I do it, and perhaps we can add some dimensions I'm now working with, but I think pursue it very organically, which is to say I don't currently use, and historically haven't really used, any kind of tool to do a kind of research review or search beyond just Googling some keywords, sort of maybe. Usually what I do is I find papers I like, and then out of those footnotes and that bibliography, it generates the places I want to go next, because I read an interesting line with a footnote saying, oh, that book. And then I move that bibliography, the interesting parts of it, into Zotero, and then those books will generate new books. And there's enough reading in all of that that I don't use any of the programs where I might say put in some keywords for my thesis and see what comes up. But I'm open to hearing about that if you use any kind of literature review programs. I don't know.
Yeah. So that what you just said kind of reminds me of like a key term. So like a sticky note for it, which is this idea called research cycles. And remind me later, we'll put a link to this. So when we think about research cycles are basically talking about how tight you are between like finding a source and deciding what it's useful, and like deciding how useful it is. So that's almost like how fast or how tight you do this loop here. I guess we could kind of say, like, if this is a loop, right? We could make it a loop.
Let's make it a loop. There we go.
Yeah.
You're doing great work.
So this is like how quickly you do this research cycle. So, but I think basically what you're saying is you take an organic approach to that, and you let each paper or each idea kind of lead you to the next one. And I mean, I think that's usually how I do it too. I think there are a lot more like advanced ways to do this. So let's see which ones I can think of. So there's Research Rabbit is the big one that's coming to mind right now. There are others though, so we can put this on later. Maybe we share this Jamboard later, and I'll put others on there later. So they're more than just Research Rabbit, but that's the big one I can think of right now. Or just like Google Scholar, Your School Librarian. Don't forget about real people. They're designed to be able to help you with this, like Web of Science, maybe. Web of Science. So there's lots of different ways to do that. And I think some of it also depends on your goals. So if you're doing like a systematic literature review that requires, I searched this term and then I narrowed down based on these keywords, you would take a very different approach than if you're kind of doing what it seems like your project is. And sometimes using something like this can be useful just to make sure there aren't holes or there aren't obvious things that you're missing.
I could see, for me, not trying to read absolutely everything, but putting in a very specific set of keywords, 6 keywords that all relate to my project, and then being surprised by the fact that somebody indeed has written, a whole book about that exact nexus of terms. So I could see this still being useful in a kind of organic sense.
Yeah. Okay, so then there's also like what tools you can use. Like once you've decided on which papers that you want to look at, there's tools that you can use to get things in. For me, I just use Zotero. I have not tried any of the other ones, but there are many other ones. Basically, the important thing here is that you get stuff in and you can easily search it and find.
Use Zotero for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
I feel like the other one, well, there are plenty, but the one that seems to play with some of the other programs I use that people talk about is Bookends.
Yeah.
But Zotero works fine, and they keep updating it and doing new things, so I'm happy to stick with it. Let's just go with
and it's open source.
And it's open source, right?
Yeah, so I think you asked if I had any special shortcuts or anything that I used for Zotero. I don't. So basically, I just have the this little button saved to Zotero. So I just have this button, and that's basically all I use. So right now, it's saving it to my research paper. So maybe I'll change it. But so basically, what I do is I have I need to like label them better, but basically if I have a couple active academic projects that I'm working on. So I think if we look here, like these are all basically inboxes for the projects that I'm working on, although I see they don't say inbox, it's something I need to fix, but that's basically the idea, is that I sort of have an effective inbox for each of the different projects and I put it in there. I mean, there are other approaches, like for example, you have a universal inbox and you use tags, or you just process the inbox periodically. There's lots of different ways to do that.
You have a review site, that's just where it goes when you haven't processed it? Is that the kind of...
Yeah, so basically like I have a project specific inbox because I work on lots of different kinds of projects, and I kind of know that I kind of know that like the stuff I'm researching for my technical research, I'm probably not going to need that reference for something else. And also sometimes my Zotero has shared workspaces. And so one of those inboxes is in a shared Zotero group, and the other one is like in my personal Zotero group. So that's kind of why I have the different inboxes also.
Yeah. I think, public service announcement for this video, we're not going to be nerding out about Zotero hacks and ways to kind of quickly import sources into citing. This is, I think, going to be focused less on the final stage of composition and more on this early stage. And for us, taking it in Zotero, have a good box for it, and move on. That seems like as far as we need to go.
Okay. Yeah, and organizing, I also personally, if you have thousands and thousands of references, I think you need to be more organized. I usually organize based on paper. So like if I'm working on a paper, I definitely have a folder, and then everything that needs to be there is there. I do sometimes use subfolders. It really depends on how big the project is. So for example, I was working on a 4-page position paper. I had like 12 references. So I just had one folder and I had everything in there. But then, I was working on a grant and I had maybe 80 to 100 references. And then I started organizing things. And I think one thing that I don't always do, but I think would be useful, especially since you know what your goal is and you kind of already know the questions because you've already written something before, would be, okay, like, how can I classify or organize some of these things so when I need to refer to it, I just know where it is in the folder. Like something like that might be nice. And you can either do folders or tags, just like in a lot of other tools. But the nice thing is you can have an item that's in a folder can be in multiple folders. So you're not as constrained as you might be in other programs.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, I have a few project specific folders. Like if I'm working on something, then I just have a folder called Fun Reading, which I guess is, if I want to get in, if I find more scholarly stuff that I think I might want to read someday. And then I have 3 folders called by author, by theme, and by type. So type is article, book, journal, article, review. The themes are the themes, kind of like higher level tags. And then the author is my most useful section where I just have all the authors divided into contemporary and like canonical dead people, because that seems useful for what I do. So
got it. Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that, but it makes sense. Okay, so the kind of the last thing is getting things out. And this is, I think, where you kind of have to get into the weeds. And Matthew and I were talking earlier, and it's basically like there's no one like golden magic workflow. So a lot of depends on what kind of tool that you want to use. So I use both Obsidian and Roam. So if you want go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but so I've spent untold hours looking around for the many different possibilities for creating a Zettelkasten, the Zettelkasten forum. You know what I'm talking about? Zettelkasten.de.
Yeah.
Those are a kind of useful review of the many different systems you can use to set up a Zettelkasten. I eventually stumbled on Obsidian, and I just loved the feel of it. It just made sense. It clicked. It worked for me. But there are many other options out there. I'm very curious if you want to talk for a second about how Roam fits. You know, there's a lot of Google videos like Roam or Obsidian, or why I switched from Roam to Obsidian and vice versa. But can you speak to both for a second?
Yeah. Okay, so I think the kind of the simplest way to say it is that Roam is an outliner at its core. So basically it has these bullet points and, kind of, I have an outline here. So, I have bullet points and it's very structured, and you can write prose, and you can delete the bullet points, but it's really designed to allow you to think in blocks and think atomically and to arrange and rearrange things. And everything really depends on how you indent and make decisions, which can be really powerful, but some people don't like that. But basically, it's like a meta way of thinking. You're not actually thinking in prose, and you're not actually writing prose compared with some of the stuff you wrote down here, which is written out.
Very prosy, yeah. So would you say it's almost like a mid-step between like a mind mapping software and just writing out prose, insofar as the goal is to structure thought more than produce thought?
Yes.
But it's not as freewheeling as like I make my whole mind map and I draw all my arrows, but it's nevertheless operating at the level of sort of a structural relationship.
That's exactly right. The way Connor White Sullivan, who's the founder of Roam, describes it is that they're trying to create a way to think and write that isn't prose.
Right.
So that's what Roam is. And Obsidian, you can do a lot of those things, but at the fundamental level, it's a file-based system. And so everything that you do kind of gets put on top of it, but its strength is more in writing prose, although it can also do all the connecting of the notes and everything, right? But it's not as good at the outlining stuff. And so there's a couple approaches. You can use some plugins that make it more Roam-like to do a lot of the outlining, and it can probably do 90% of the functionality, but it still doesn't feel quite as nice, I don't think. So then you can either combine it with like another local outliner like Logseek, or you can just write in Roam, do your outline, and then when you're ready to actually write prose, you kind of move it over. That's more what I do, but I've actually found that it's really helpful to be able to iterate between an outline and then the prose. So like imagine if I had responses to each of these bullet points nested underneath them, and I could use that to structure a document and then go back and forth between looking at it as an outline and looking at it as a document. Like that would be really, really cool and really useful. So I've been thinking about ways to do it in Obsidian. I think there are good ways to do it, and there are more coming. But right. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So I'm just wondering, with respect to the question I asked earlier about sometimes you have a desire, you have a text and you say, this is such an essential text for me. I just want a shorthand version of the entire argument that I can refer to and access. Do you imagine that Roam might be a place where you put those kinds of things, or are you kind of transitioning and trying to actually move the stuff you do in Roam into Obsidian right now, so you're not between two programs?
I kind of go into Roam when I'm really stuck on something and I need to think hard. and I use Obsidian for most other things. It's just that, and a lot of that is because Obsidian can do a lot of the things that Roam can do, but I haven't necessarily always taken time to optimize my workflows in Obsidian yet. So I'm really, really comfortable in Roam, and I'm like decently comfortable in Obsidian, but sometimes if I just don't want to think about the tool and just want to like write stuff, I sometimes I go back and use Roam for that.
One last question, but then we can move on, because I think this is going to be a very Obsidian focused video, I think, if we're correct, because that's certainly the I'm on. But not being familiar with Roam and hearing you talk about an outliner, I'm looking at this Word doc here. You know, to me, an outline is like, okay, write something, enter, tab, next thing, enter, tab, tab. So how is it that Roam is facilitating that process in a way that is, what is Roam doing that is more helpful to you than just the ability to just build out an outline in a Word doc? Like, how does it make that process more seamless or more intuitive or more powerful?
Yeah, so there's user experience point of view. So for example, if I'm click here and I hit tab, it actually tabs distill, right? It doesn't tab the whole thing. If I went like this. So there's some tiny little things, right? That like when I'm working with an outline, when I hit tab, it means I want to indent, not add a tab here. So that's like a very minor thing. So there's lots of those things that I think Roam does really well. But then there's other things like being able to very easily and very quickly refer to different parts of the text that you're working with. So I could link something that I wrote down here to something that I wrote up here. And that can be really powerful in like a Zettelkasten type setting, or even in a project management type setting. Like I can have a long to-do list, and then I can just select specific items from that to-do list. Of course, you can still copy paste. Like it's not like you can't do it another way most of the time. But if you get comfortable with it's called block referencing, basically like inserting links to different specific snippets of text, that can be really handy. But you can also do that with embedding in Obsidian. It's just a little bit higher friction because Roam has really optimized the workflow around that.
Yep. And we are a low friction positive call here. That's kind of the. Okay, cool. Well, thanks. I nevertheless have put all my eggs in the Obsidian basket, so maybe we go there.
Yeah, I guess the last thing I would mention is that Roam is really, really great for multiplayer. So basically for working with other people. Right now with Obsidian, if you want to collaborate with other people, you have to use something like Dropbox, which actually you had a question about cloud services. So we can talk about that later too. But it's very, very easy to collaborate with someone on a Roam graph because it's all on the web. Whereas with Obsidian, you basically have to upload to a cloud service. You have to agree which cloud service you're using. You have to pay for all of it and all that. Although Roam is not free, so that's part of what you're paying for. But so I should point that part out. Okay, yeah. So I just, while we were talking earlier, I was just like, okay, so if I want to set this up for getting things out of the system, by that I basically mean being able to have a site key that you can use, like the Zotero site key. And then also getting the actual highlights or notes that you've taken on a PDF in the system. In Roam, there's the main tool to use this is called Zotero Roam. In Obsidian, there's a few different tools. So MD Notes basically extracts the notes that are in a PDF and then converts them to Markdown. And then you can import those Markdown files. Quick Add is basically a plugin that's was written that allows you to do the MD Notes stuff and some other quick stuff, which is nice. And then the citations plugin is what you use to refer to a specific file or a specific article. So Zotero Roam is probably the most powerful. It kind of does everything all at once and is really cool, but it is Roam specific. So Obsidian, you can do a lot of this stuff. You just use these tools instead.
Yeah, I do have one or two of those plugins, but I haven't used them enough to even remember which ones. And what was the word site key? This is for a I don't know, for someone who knows nothing about.
Yeah. So basically, a site key is a unique identifier that refers to something that's inside your Zotero. So, article, website, etc. They all, if they have a unique ID, then you can refer to them.
So I actually use this. I just didn't know what it was called. This is when you basically click on a link that takes you to something outside of your Obsidian potentially, or
yeah. So you can set your Obsidian up so that when you click on the link, it takes you to your Zotero, and you can also use it like what do you use when you're compiling your references when you make your paper? Word.
Hypothetically, in some future where this is all organized, some combination of Zotero with, I'm not sure, like potentially a Scrivener or maybe Obsidian. I haven't actually figured out how I'm going to do that.
Okay.
What I used to do was just spend like 12 incredibly frustrating hours trying to remember all of my references in Word and like reinsert them into my document, and it was a disaster. So
yeah,
that's another thing I want to get on top of.
So basically, citations plugin is like you refer to it with a specific syntax, and then it just automatically knows this is, Strother et al.
Yeah.
And it just knows, and it does that for you, which is really handy.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. So that's capture. Let's go back and see. I think that covered a lot of the questions that you had. Okay, so now I wanted to transition just to talking about the overall structure of my main Obsidian Vault, which Matthew had questions about. And so I'm using a kind of a modified version of this tool or technique called the Johnny Decimal system, which basically encourages you to organize your top level folders using numbers. And the advantage of doing this is if you remember the number of the folder that you're looking for, like 0 to 100, when you search, you can just type that number. So for example, like 32. Oh, sorry, I think I pressed the wrong button. What am I doing? I totally forgot the shortcut to open a file. There we go. 32, like 30. If I type 30, then it'll bring up all my bleeding notes.
Yep.
Okay. So basically, if you have them organized this way, when you're searching for something, you can just type the number of the folder and it narrows down your search and makes it much easier to find what you're looking for. It also organizes it in the sidebar.
This would be like, let's say that I'm working specifically on my Nietzsche project, Zettelkasten. I might have just a number. If I want to search, I know I'm putting a note into that. Maybe I just can do that number and I'm already in that space. Versus maybe a separate sort of like personal Wikipedia that I can, if I want to go there, I just put the number in and go straight to that space.
Yeah.
You use this a lot? Like, you find it quite practical as you're navigating around? I mean, it looks aesthetically or nice in just looking at the structure, the hierarchy here. It looks good.
Yeah. Part of the reason I wanted to do this was because I really wanted to have a lot of stuff in my vault, because the friction of going between vaults just feels really high to me. And so I only have like private things and not in my Obsidian Vault. This way I can kind of share it with people and talk about it with people. But so and when I started building the Obsidian Vault, I had a lot of experience using Roam before. So I kind of knew the kinds of things that I might want to be putting in here. And where my Roam was really disorganized, I sort of had some idea that how to structure this. So basically a new admin was going to be like templates and things like that. Para system is Tiago Forte's projects, areas, resources, archive system, which we'll talk about in a second. I knew I would want to have a Zettelkasten of some kind. And then I knew I would have fleeting notes, which I could have put in the Zettelkasten folder, but I have separate for reasons that I'll describe. And then I also had external facing things. So I have like my digital garden and my website, but those are mostly comprised of markdown files. And so I originally thought about like having a separate vault for the digital garden, having a separate vault for the website. But then again, I kind of found that the friction was sort of high. So I liked just sticking them in as a top level folder. And this way, when I want to update my digital garden, I can just open it. If I'm working on something in my Zettelkasten, I can just copy it and put it in the digital garden, or move it and put it in the digital garden.
Nice. Yeah.
So that's why I did that. So I think I can show you the sub levels. So all my attachments go here. I do have a separate folder for templates and templater. Templater is a specific plugin that allows you to do some more advanced stuff with templates. I don't know that you need to have a separate folder, but I do. And then Quick Add, which is a plugin. I think I have like a file or like, oh, I guess it's empty, but at one point I had some stuff in here. So
what would that, because just, I mean, I probably will, hopefully you don't object. I think I will probably just copy your entire structure, and then as just a starting point, and then things that aren't useful to me, I'll end up tossing out. So do you mind explaining like Quick Add? Was that?
Oh, so yeah. So Quick Add is a plugin. Let's see, we can look at it. I guess there's not really a lot to see here, but basically what Quick Add allows you to do is actually, so there's templates, captures, macros, and multis. So basically, it's a Swiss Army knife. You can do lots of different things. So one of the things that you can do that's convenient is if let's say I want to remember to do something in my Obsidian Vault, like remove Quick Add folder. I just hit a hotkey, entered this text, and hit enter, and it opened up a file for me and appended a to-do at the bottom of the file with this, inside this file called possible Obsidian improvements. So you can use it to quickly take notes on things. You can use it to make templates or insert text. It can do a lot of different things, basically.
Yeah, cool.
So it's something to definitely play around with yourself and like look at examples of what other people have done with it to like learn what it can do, basically. I only use it for that. I don't use it for anything else right now. I do have a home note. So that's kind of based on Nick Milo's Linking Your Thinking. He talks a lot about these things called like maps of contents. And I think I call it a table of contents, not a map of content. But these are basically linking to what I would call like a root file that I use in my vault. I just am experimenting with it, so I have it here. But basically, this is like all the articles in my vault, recipes, permanent notes, literature notes, and we'll get through to that later.
Yeah, I have watched his videos, not the full course, but the ones that are publicly available. And you'll see in my messy vault that I do have some MOC files, but I also have questions about sort of naming conventions and how they actually become useful as you navigate around. So
yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the admin. Go ahead.
Quick note, that would be every permanent note you've ever taken, organized in some kind of.
Let's see what I got in here. Yes, I think so. So basically, I'm using this plugin called Data View, which in the edit mode, it just looks like code. But then if you view in the preview mode, I have what are called entries into the Zettelkasten. So the way I structured it was that I kind of have these top level structure notes. And right now, actually, the only stuff I have in my Zettelkasten is personal stuff. I've been writing about anxiety and perfectionism. So this is like the top level anxiety one. This is the top level perfectionism one. And then this is just a list of all the notes and when they've been added.
And entry, what's the point of entry? This is like a way to it's a way to enter from a certain perspective and get a view of what's going on based on that perspective.
So like, let's click this one. I just like put this thing that I designed. And so this is kind of like an MOC type.
I see. Yeah. Cool.
Way I organize.
Yeah, that seems cool.
Yeah. Okay. And so then Para and Zettelkasten. So I know a lot of people have asked me about this, is why I use both and how I think about using both. And so basically at the top level, there's projects, areas, resources, archive. Then within, we have each of these specific folders, all my projects, different areas, etc. usually this is the top level. I usually don't have more folders underneath any of these, but it depends. Like in the areas, I think, like in my house folder, I think I have multiple. I have folders underneath, but I that doesn't really matter, I don't think. Anyway, so
without asking you to sort of like do an entire sort of para, tutorial, since that might not be the focus today, could you just speak for a second to how it is useful, for those who might study it and action it in their own Zettelkasten?
Yeah. So basically, paras focused on actionabilities. So from projects are considered the things that are most actionable. They're the things you're actively working on right now. And archive is things that you don't want to delete, but they're not really relevant. They're not something you're actively working on, and they're not something that you think you need to recall anytime soon.
But
and
project archive, it's not just like that one article about that piece of information I'm interested in. It's like things I might do archive.
Well, okay, so anything that was in one of these three buckets can go into the archive.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of up to you, I think, a little bit. But like, if I know I'm not going to need it anytime soon, like I'm not going to delete the fact, like the notes that I planned for my fall 2021 vacation, but I don't think I'm going to need them anytime soon. So
I see.
They're still there, but I don't think I'm going to need them.
By no means like a general archive of all of your shit. It's very much the archive for your para stuff.
Exactly. It's the archive. I have a separate archive for my general shit that I'll show you. Okay, so then areas is just like the good way to distinguish between areas and resources is how personal it is. So stuff in areas is the stuff that's like really relevant to me, but isn't something that I could or would just randomly send to another person. So it's kind of more specific. It's kind of like the difference between like a permanent note and a literature note in that sense, sort of like it's like mine rather than someone else's. So like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like I'm in this scholarship program and like these are my notes that I took about our different meetings that I'm at some point I'll go through and process. And they're really important to me, but they're probably not that important to anyone else. We'll contrast that with like, do you have anything in here? I guess I want to write a resource about getting promoted to full professor. Obviously, I'm not there yet, so I have a note there that I want to talk about with that. But I have like I wrote down the type of cheese that I really liked, just random stuff. So maybe Obsidian, they'll have something more interesting in there. Oh, Zotero, Obsidian. Yeah, I guess I don't have that much interesting stuff in here. Examples. So it's like things that I think that I could reasonably just share this with anyone else. It's not really, there's nothing secret. Oh, and here's actually the forum post that I made about the quick capture workflow. I put the first draft of that in here. So just kind of random stuff that it's not super private or anything that I would readily just send to someone else.
Yeah.
So that's resources. And so the big reason why I want to have the para in addition to the Zettelkasten is because a lot of the projects that I'm working on don't really necessarily need to be in Zettelkasten. So like, let's see an example, like planning the next book club for a group that I'm in. I want to work on that, but I don't need to have a Zettelkasten note related to that. Or like, this is like planning the next steps for my research project. Like I'm thinking about it, but I don't necessarily need to have a Zettelkasten note about it. There are things, sorry, go ahead.
Just where there is a Venn diagram overlap, like for, let's say with my rewriting my master's thesis, and I have a next step I want to take that would probably involve working in my Zettelkasten. Do you nevertheless have that next step in your para? Para is very much like a guide to help you figure out things you want to do, even if that includes working with your Zettelkasten. It's just not a sort of where you store your knowledge.
Yeah. So one of the ways that I think about it is that stuff kind of starts in a project, like theoretical basis of low frequencies. Like this is something that I think this is like a technical project that I'm working on. And I know that stuff in this will probably eventually want to become like a Zettelkasten permanent note. So I have this is a note that I think should be a permanent note at some point. So this is examples of these artifacts that other researchers have shown. And so this is a site key. It's actually referring to a page, but this part in here is the site key. Remember we were talking about Zotero site keys.
Oh, yeah.
So I just basically have a list of these 4 papers, and I just pasted a bunch of links. And at some point, I will clean this up and make it into a permanent note. But right now, it's still in my project because I'm actively kind of working on it and thinking about it. And so the reason I like the project thing, even though I know this will be a Zettelkasten node eventually, is because it's just really easy to navigate if all the files that might be relevant to that specific context are just available in the sidebar. Like you don't have to think about it. They're just there.
So it would, to speak, I think I'm hearing you saying that, because arguably these things are, in a sense, they're kinds of fleeting notes. They're like a not yet fully formed set of ideas I'm working with. And we'll get there, I think, when we look at your 30 fleeting notes. But is that more a general dump as opposed to the projects? Is like sort of, let's say, fleeting notes that you kind of have a stronger sense you really want to work with them and get to them? And
yes, I think that's right. They're like fleeting notes so that have been somewhat processed in the sense is like they're put in the appropriate folder. And also related to that, you see how some of these have a prefix and some of them don't. The prefix means that I made them as a fleeting note, at least at one point. And sometimes I'll rename it and sometimes I don't. Like this note, detecting low frequency artifacts, I could use the phase. I just was walking around and I had this idea. And so I wrote it down and now it's sitting in here. So when I return to this project, because it's kind of on hold right now, I will go through all these notes and be like, what the heck do I have in here? What was the next step? And I would see this note and say, okay, I could use the phase. Oh, okay, what was I thinking about there? And then I could either rename this note or I could do something and then delete the note, whatever I think is appropriate.
the 12-digit naming convention, which, there are various debates on various forums about this, right? And using it versus tags and other searchable functions. But for you, it's just a way of saying, I made this note at this moment in time, and it's a way of visually seeing, this is when I made this thing that is not yet processed.
Yes.
But once and move it, once it gets processed and better named and better tagged, you feel like that convention is no longer useful given Obsidian's other search ability.
Yeah, that's right. So I do kind of like being able to, like in this AirTag thing that I'm working on, being able to see like my more recent fleeting notes, like know that the stuff at the bottom is the stuff I did recently. It's kind of nice. But but stuff that I know is more reference information, like that I don't do. And so for example, if this is an example of a note where I just have links to other notes. So like if they're not in the same folder. So that's what I do if it's not in the same folder. I just have a file that links to other files.
Yep.
So that's kind of why I do that differently. And so like basically at the end of the project, Tiago Forte basically says you should have like a project shutdown. So like once I move one of these projects to the archive and I'm done with it, I should make sure to, at that point, decide like, do I want to flesh any of these things out into my Zettelkasten? Do I want to move a specific note or link to a specific note in like my areas or my resources so it's easier to find again? Or do I just want to put it in the archive? Because I can always still find it in the archive. It's just about how actionable and how easy to find it will be.
Yep. Okay.
So that's the para system. And then the Zettelkasten permanent literature sources. And yeah, I do, which you could say reference notes. I just call it sources. Fleeting notes is separate. So permanent notes, per Nick Milo / Johnny Decimal conventions, I guess I just call the index, I give the index note a 0. So it shows up at the top. So if I am navigating using the file explorer, I just find this at first. So this is the one that we looked at earlier, but I find it here instead. And for Zettelkasten, I also do really like using the graph view. I think I have the Zettelkasten set up. Yeah, so I have some filters that I've applied to the graph view to basically search just in my Zettelkasten folder.
Okay.
And then
Right.
give me group things based on whether or not they're a permanent note, a literature note, or a source. And so this is pretty handy because I can navigate just like looking through. So like my anxiety notes, like they're like really densely linked and all over here, but I can see the things. And then there's just like a random community talk that I went to that was cool that I took notes on that's not really linked to anything. So this is useful. Or there's like a reference here that there's a note for, but it's not linked to anything.
So this helps you make graph more useful by applying filters. So you're not just like looking at everything that's sitting in Obsidian when you bring up graph.
So that's an advantage of putting it in the folder or using a tag for your Zettelkasten as a whole, because I don't just want permanent notes, literature notes, sources. I want anything that's in that folder. So it's just a handy, easy way to do that.
And this works by this 0 permanent note. Sorry, is that this? Can you click on the 0 permanent note so I can see that really quick?
Yeah. So it's kind of showing the same information, just one's visual. So this just kind of gives you a list, and it only shows the permanent notes. It doesn't show the literature notes, whereas this shows everything. So I like using the graph view for navigating, exploring.
Definitely, yeah.
And like you can see, I was reading Braiding Sweetgrass, and I took a lot of literature notes, but I didn't process any of them. And like some of them maybe should really be permanent notes, not literature notes or whatever, but you don't need to be perfect. Okay. So permanent notes in the same structure for literature notes, basically 0. I also have the index if I want to use it. See, I haven't put anything in here since October, but these are the literature notes that I have. And then sources, I do organize them: articles, books, events, podcasts, videos. Part of the reason they're organized this way was because when I was using the Readwise plugin, it automatically puts them in these subfolders, but it's also just useful in general. So I use DataView for this also. So I have a couple books. I have a couple articles. I think I have more than just these articles. I think I haven't tagged my articles correctly necessarily. And then videos, events. And so I can go into each of these. So you see how I have some articles here that didn't show up here? I think I just have a different template, or I didn't fill it in. So I think I need to fix that, but I will.
This plugin that lets you organize things. It's almost like it's like a map of content plugin, basically, but one that makes it. I mean, it looks nice and it gives you the date modified, etc. Right? So do you find that to be a really useful plugin in the way that you navigate your maps of content?
Which one?
I believe you showed me like when you see pages that have links and the date modified and like a kind of points.
That's DataView. Yeah, so I like DataView.
Be the best kind of, I don't know, basically better than just like manually creating a map of content. Like DataView really helps.
Right. So okay. So basically, it depends. So for like for this note, I did this all manually, but that was because I was kind of trying to do sense making, right? I was trying to think through, what are these different notes? What are they about? How do I want to navigate them? Whereas this is really just an index. And so an index can be generated automatically because it's just giving me everything in ABC order. I'm not trying to do anything more complicated than that. So basically, a map of content is meant to be more than just an index. It's meant to be manually curated, whereas an index, you can use data view or some other plugin to just generate them up for you automatically.
Yeah, that's actually very useful. Indexes versus maps of content. Maps of content takes you to a next level where you're creating sense-making links and structures, and it's not just alphabetical order.
Exactly. Okay, so I know you asked about templates. I can just send you send you those later. So let's see what templates I have. Article, book, daily note, fleeting note, import note. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, that was, I was playing around with a different way to import Zotero stuff. Ingredient. I did some cool stuff with recipes, which we won't have to talk about. I don't know what time to talk about, but yeah, so just a bunch of different kinds of notes. I can send you the
And are you your templates? I mean, again, this is a thing that is very personal. Lots of people say, you know, keep it simple, or some people really nerd out and do all kinds of metadata, but
yeah, they're mostly pretty simple. Like the book one, title, author, year, tags, URL. This basically gives you the title based on the metadata. And then I like adding the data view thing, because basically it's like, what are the permanent notes associated with a specific book? Like that's kind of nice to have. Like,
can you show me that? Yeah.
Yeah. So like this book called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. So see how I said equals this dot title? It takes this title up here and makes that there. So that's a template, and then I fill in the top, and it fills in everything else.
Yeah. And then the data view plugin part, it's kind of shows you
it shows me the notes that are associated with this book. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the note is just like the highlights from the book.
Yep.
Yeah. So like I said, I can send these to you so you have them. I guess the other notable ones are like daily note template. Everyone's is going to be super customized, but basically I just have the tag. Daily journals for whatever I'm working on. Top 3 priorities. I try to focus on 3 things each day. And then morning review is assign, collect, plan, prioritize, plan. And then these actually insert like my top priorities for the week and for the semester, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can use the calendars plugin for this. Basically, I have a daily note, a weekly note, and then a quarterly note. And I kind of use the quarterly note, even though it doesn't perfectly align with the semesters, I use the quarterly note as a semester plan. So let's see if
talk about a little bit this, I think, in your digital garden when you go into your
yeah, so I have like this is what I'm working on, like, and this is week 50, week 51. So I just stuff that I know that I want to do. It's just high level overview.
Do you find, this is a very abstract question, but well, it's just a very high level question. Do you find that this, it looks like instead of using an OmniFocus or a bullet journal or whatever, you're managing your priorities, your to-do lists, your long-term goals, your short-term stuff in the Zettelkasten?
Oh, I do use OmniFocus, and I actually use the same structure, the para structure in OmniFocus. Well, it's really only projects and areas. There's no resources in archive. Well, I guess they're archived, the archive's hidden. But so this is just like the 10,000 foot view. And then OmniFocus has the specific projects that I'm working on, and then areas as well. So that basically follows the same structure. I try to name them the same, but I usually don't.
Play well together? Like, how do you find that repeating it at the 10,000 foot view in your Zettelkasten is a place that is just that's kind of where you go each morning. And then if you want to say, okay, now I need to deep dive, you go over to OmniFocus to take a kind of closer look at a project at a granular level.
Right. So I'm actually reading Getting Things Done right now. Don't think I ever read it, but I've tried to implement some things in that fashion. And basically what David Allen argues is that you should focus on your specific tasks. And then once you kind of have that under control, you kind of automatically get the 10,000 foot view, which I think is an interesting argument. Basically, he's arguing bottom up for tasks.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting argument. And so I am pretty good at the bottom up thing. And so usually I wrote these after doing a mind sweep and brain dump and creating all the projects and things. And then I said, okay, well, I already can see all this stuff in OmniFocus, and now I'm just writing it out about when I'm actually going to get it all done. And so this is why it's so spare. It's like here, it's just like 4 bullet points for the whole week, because I just need to check at a glance, like, am I focused on the right things? And then I go into OmniFocus like for the things. And also, like, I don't really care about putting like when I'm going to do the laundry and stuff in Obsidian. Like, I just put that on OmniFocus and I just do it.
Kind of an eyes on the prize. And is there a reason, like, I guess, why don't you try to also have your 10,000 foot view in OmniFocus and just leave all of that over there? Is there a reason you like having this all in one place?
OmniFocus doesn't really do that. Like, you can't really do that very well, I don't think. I mean, if maybe someone has done it, but I just feel like it's really meant to do projects. It doesn't really have a separate section. I mean, I guess you could do it with tags and custom views or something, but it just doesn't feel important.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay. Well, I've got many things to work on, but I like how this looks. I like the idea of it. And I will say that just I've not read Getting Things Done. But I'm familiar with the base. I've looked at the basic flow chart of how it works, and the therapeutic value of putting all of the shit in your mind somewhere and processing it. It feels really good. Brain dumps.
It's nice. It's nice.
And I'd like to get brain dumps to be a more regular part of my life, because every time I do it, I feel metaphysically lighter. I lose like 10 metaphysical pounds.
Oh yeah, so part of the GTD thing is the regular review, and so this is the weekly review. I talk about this on my digital garden, but basically this note just has the top tier priorities that I fill in, which are the same as the ones on the other thing, and then this is just like the weekly review that I do at the end of each week. Like, I'm going to do mine tomorrow. I just go through all of these.
Cool.
Okay, let's keep going here. So I guess kind of the last thing to talk about is the fleeting notes. And I kind of have a bunch of different things that are in here. So to process, this is my inbox, my quick capture inbox. So we can talk about the quick capture workflow, and I'll also help you set up yours once we're done talking about the overall thing. But so basically with the quick capture workflow, the motivation is that I want to very quickly, when I have an idea, whether or not I'm away from my computer or at my computer, where I can record that idea and not lose track of it. And so I like the idea of creating distinct notes. That way I can move them to wherever they belong. Remember, like, I would move a fleeting note that was about a project to the project folder. It's really, when it's a note, it's really easy to move this around. So basically, anytime I hit the appropriate hotkey or the iOS shortcut, so like I'll do that right now, like in this case, what it does is it shrinks so I can still see whatever else I'm doing. But it basically just created a new note in
shortcut you created that I want to set up for myself. Right?
Yeah. So it gives it a tag fleeting note. It tags it with the current date, so it's just easy to find all the notes in that date if I want to. I actually don't really use that much, but it doesn't really hurt to be in there. So then I could write like reviewing capture workflow with Matthew, make sure to edit video before uploading. So I might just put it in there. And so as long as this task isn't super urgent, I just leave it in OmniFocus and then I'll put it in, or sorry, I leave it in Obsidian. But if it's something that like really needs to happen, I would probably use the quick capture for OmniFocus instead and put it there. But and sometimes I'm good about renaming the file. Sometimes I'm not. So you can see like about half of them I renamed. But if I forget, basically every week, I clear the whole thing out. So like I would go through step by step and delete anything that and process anything. So this is where the cool part about the capture workflow comes up, is that I worked with a TFT hacker. He's a pretty active person in the Obsidian and Tools for Thought community. He basically helped me and wrote all the code for these 3 templates called archive and process next file, move and process next file, or trash and process next file. So basically what I do is I start with the top note, and then I have shortcuts. So I can either archive, which just moves it down to this folder here. I can move it. So I can move it to a project folder or an area or a resource, or I can trash it. So if it's really just junk and not that important, then I just delete it. So because like sometimes it's like something like this where it's like make sure to edit the video, but like once I've edited the video, I don't need this note anymore. It's like really not useful, so I just delete it. And I have the archive because sometimes I'm nervous about deleting things that I think I might need. So but other things I just trash them. I just delete them.
And like looking at back at your para, you do have quite some fleeting notes in there that still have the timestamp that tells you it's a fleeting note, so is that something that you would have, like, is the very, very first stage of capture for things that are your ideas or whatever, does it always going into the to process, or do you sometimes just stick it straight in kind of a project folder because you
Yeah. So if I am at my computer already and I'm not like in the middle of something and don't need to quick capture, I do also have a shortcut that can make a Zettelkasten note, although it does still make it in this. So it's, for me, it's Option Z, although it does just make it in the same folder, but then I could just quickly move it to like Frontiers paper, like let's say. So I do have the option of doing that. And part of the reason we wanted to write this workflow was because it moves automatically to the next file in the folder. It's a very fast way to process all of your notes. Because one of the things I didn't like about Obsidian at first was the fact that like if you move something, it either stays in the same folder, or like if you delete something, then it's just like closes and there's no file open. I didn't like that. I wanted it to process it like my Gmail inbox, basically.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So now it's just like my Gmail inbox.
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay, so I'll explain these last ones and then we'll set up yours. So in progress is basically notes that I'm taking, but that aren't related to a specific project. And honestly, these are things that like, this is like my guilty writing backlog of just like random notes that I think would be interesting or useful, but like aren't really processed enough to go in the Zettelkasten yet. So there's just like a bunch, or they're just like ideas that I want to keep in my back of my mind, but they're just not really linked to anything. And some of them are like developed, some of them are not. Like this is from August, and it's just like a link to a tweet and then 2 sentences about it.
So it's kind of like a semi-processed thing that you aren't quite, for whatever reason, ready to put it in a permanent note or whatever, but you want to tell yourself that you've at least touched it.
Yeah. And I do refer to these. Well, I guess I don't refer to this one, but there's some of them that I refer to in this file called Open Questions. And so I do kind of take the bottom-up approach, which is like I have these ideas that I've been writing about, and then I have this file called Open Questions where I think if you expand, you can see the questions here, but it's just gotten kind of unwieldy. But like,
I have in an analog notebook, but I would really like to do a version of that in the Zettelkasten.
Yeah. So I just have these questions that I'm kind of thinking about, and like at one point I'm gonna be ready to write about them, and so I'm just collecting all the stuff like how should society prioritize spending in technological innovation when we have so many problems? And so I just link all the notes or the readings that I think are relevant. And some of these are just lists and some of these are other things.
Oh, where does this live? This open questions?
Oh yeah, so where does it live? I think it lives, yeah, it lives in its own folder. It should probably go somewhere else, but I just have it under open loops. So I just put it in there.
Is it the only open loop?
Yeah, it's the only open loop right now. I could have I guess I could put more stuff in there, but I think I just never want to put anything else in there.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm kind of confident because I follow you, but we'll do it more closely. Look at mine. Cool. I like that a lot. That's actually feels really useful to me.
Yeah, and I do use it to flesh out stuff. Like I know I want to write this article called "What I've Learned from PKM," and so I have all these notes that are related to that.
Nice.
Yeah, okay, so the last things is just the archive and then the daily notes, weekly notes, quarterly notes. I just put them in here because I think they're effectively fleeting notes. Like I usually don't need to, I might refer to a daily note from a day or two ago, but I try to not write too much stuff on the daily note that should be in a project folder or in the Zettelkasten eventually or whatever. So that's why they just live in this folder.
And the weekly notes, quarterly notes, these are just, again, it's just 10,000 foot views on what you're trying to...
And the review, like the check boxes for the review.
Right. And you don't find, this would be a question for me, is that if I put my to-do stuff in there, and then I'm trying to use the Zettelkasten in a whatever, and then I've got my knowledge, my Wikipedia thing going on, you don't find when you're searching around that you're bumping up against all of these terms that are, I don't know, like water the garden, feed the cat, alongside, how to solve society's problems. Like, do you find that keeping all this daily note stuff and not deleting it gets messy when you just try to go in and play around in your Zettelkasten and look for connections?
I haven't had that experience because I don't write too much of the like random stuff in my daily notes. Like I know a lot of people use it for journaling, but I have heard other people talk about that. And I think one of the things that you can do is, if that's a really big issue, is that you can use, when you go to search, you can try to exclude a specific file, a folder, for example, and then that way that stuff doesn't come up, or like exclude a specific tag or something like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Okay, and these things are, I was trying out this thing called Pandoc, and then this is a file that I just haven't put in the right place. So these things shouldn't be here. But then this is my digital garden and my website, which are basically based on this site software called Jekyll. So there's a bunch of stuff in here that's not marked down, and sometimes it doesn't show up in Obsidian, which could be a little bit confusing, but I have my digital garden just sits right here, which is really useful. So I can just easily move stuff into the notes directly from here.
That's my curiosity, briefly talking about Pandoc, just because when I look up academic workflows, there's a lot of people who talk about a kind of like Zotero Obsidian plus Pandoc is the dream, but I don't know why one would want it.
So I think I guess people do use it with Word as well. So basically the idea is, if you really don't want to write in Word or in LaTeX, and you really just want to do all your writing in Obsidian, and you just want to format it and send it out into Word or into a PDF so that like your advisor can review it, for example, but you never want to write in Word or you never want to write in LaTeX, Pandoc is really useful, because then you basically only write in Obsidian, and then you have to do all the work of processing it and setting it up, but then you never have to write in those formats again, for the most part. I mean, there may be minor things, but
yeah, I got it. It's like a packager that helps you, shoot it to Word or PDF or whatever without needing to go play in those evil programs, if that's how you feel about them.
Right.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I can help you set up your workflow.
Okay. So I'll just very quickly, what you're seeing here is my attempt to sort of, while we were talking, copy some of these things, but fail to actually do it with everything. And in some cases, accidentally make a note instead of a folder. So that's just that. And then here is my world. So archive question mark was about, like if you had an image, or this actually relates to the DEVONThink question I asked you in the email. So
all right, yeah.
The question about like, okay, Zotero file reference manager, which sure, you can go in and double click that and bring up a PDF. And then you have Zettelkasten, which is your sort of second brain. This is the place that you have processed resources, as we've talked about, into searchable, connected ideas for yourself. But in the middle spot, there's where do you store and archive a PDF of a book, just for an example. And it seems to me that some people bring in DEVONthink or a similar system, DEVONthink in particular, because it's got such amazing search, and they leave all of their PDFs and their stuff in there. So if they ever want to just look in their entire research library for a key term, they use that instead of Obsidian. So can you speak just for 1 second to the question of the archive? I think this was me just sort of playing around with, is this something I'm going to do in Obsidian?
Yeah. One thing that I haven't used DEVONthink myself, I've talked to a couple people about what they like about it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I didn't realize, but you can actually do full text search of your entire library in Zotero. So you don't actually need DEVONthink just to search, but DEVONthink has semantic search, so it's much more powerful. Like it can suggest things for you. You don't have to know the exact keyword. So if you think you need something more powerful than just searching for a specific word in a PDF, then DEVONthink might be a good option. It also depends a little bit on, you know, how you want to store your information. So Zotero, you can store it on your own computer, or you can pay for their cloud syncing service. DEVONthink is a lot more money up front, but then I think then you store everything on your own computer, I think. So there's also that consideration. But personally, I haven't found that I need it. I think it's the sort of thing where if you need it, you'll know, would be my guess.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. And do you want to do just a really quick minute on, this might not be the right moment, but since we're talking about archives, which cloud service you use in relation to?
Yes. So I use both Dropbox and Google Drive. Mm-hmm. Not for any great reason. So I get free Google Drive through work. And so all of my work files are on Google Drive. And then, you know, anytime you create a Google Doc or anything like that, it's on my personal Google Drive. So I also have a personal Google Drive. And then I was using Dropbox a lot. Like I went to MIT and the founder of Dropbox was from MIT. And so I have like some free space on Dropbox. So I've been using Dropbox. Dropbox's sync is a lot better, although Google Drive's sync has improved a lot recently. So I think really you could use either of them. I might suggest Dropbox if you don't use a lot of Google Suite stuff, but if you do, then you might as well just use Google Drive, probably is what I would say.
Okay, cool. So archive, that's what I just said. Daily notes, I just did this because I was playing around with possible hierarchies. Fleeting notes, I never used. Here's literature notes where I was playing with, this would be an example of my take on a particular article I read, where, you know, I do have a couple templates that I was playing with. I would really like to see yours to just sort of compare. I'm not sure if this is a little overkill or works for me, but it'd be great to compare the ones I use. I have these MOCs. I'm not even sure if I was doing this right. I think my MOCs were kind of a index in the way that you talk about using that data view plugin. Yeah. They weren't sort of, I like the idea that a real MOC is going one step further, and it is linking your thoughts, but with your own kind of editorial commenting, not just an index. So that's something I'll definitely take out of this. And then this was my attempt to use the Matter Obsidian plugin, which failed for reasons that are beyond my skills. And then I had some permanent notes which at this point were mostly a small combination of like a definition that came out of a literature note. So, right, so this was from the literature note I just showed you. There was a new word that was suggested, so I made a little permanent note to be a kind of, I've heard it described as a strong fact, like a place that you want to record a particular idea. This is not an example of sort of my own thinking. It's just taking an idea and putting it in my own words. I'm not sure if you, I guess this falls under the, I don't mean to ramble, but I think a lot of what I've done so far, because I didn't want to begin the project until I'd kind of really gotten used to playing with this Obsidian Vault. All of this stuff belongs under the kind of personal wiki category we were talking about, of sort of that memory management slice of the pie.
Yeah. So this is making me think about in How to Read a Book, they talk about in analytical reading, how one of the things you have to do is you have to come to terms with the author. And that's actually also a literal thing involving actual terms. So I think a lot of the notes that you have here, like, well, this one in particular, like this is a term and you're basically defining your term. So I think you can classify that as a permanent note, or you could potentially even think about having a separate type of note for terms. I actually did that when we did Rome Book Club. Basically, we had 3 kinds of notes. We had questions, terms, and propositions. And propositions are basically permanent notes, but they're declarative sentences. So I think you could kind of group all of those as permanent notes, or you could think about subdividing them. So it's kind of up to you, like once you start making all these notes, whether or not it feels important to be able to quickly find things that you're calling, oh, you called a definition, right? So that's kind of like a term, right? So thinking about whether or not it's important to distinguish those things or not.
I think the tripartite schema you just suggested is great. This suddenly is making sense to me, that it's all permanent note because it has been processed into your own words and you want to hold on to it. But you have questions, which can all be kind of archived in that open questions place that you can just, if you ever want to go check in, you can play with your different questions and categories. And then you have terms, and that's, you're reading and you read about Aristotle and you continue and you come across Aristotle's in another reading and you add a little fact and you add a little thought, and it's just kind of your personal wiki on Aristotle as you keep your reading life going, but it's not related to a project. And then the propositions feels to me that more mercenary style. I want to write about this, so I'm going to sort of extract this idea and turn it into an idea for myself that's probably going to become part of a project, or conceivably could become part of a project.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it feels the most like it's the active, this is a thought for me that I want to plug into something I produce. And I don't know, I think if all of these sit in permanent notes, but are just divided by a metadata hashtag or something, that seems like I don't know, that kind of feels like that works for me.
That's great. Yeah.
And then it lets you also, in search with these filters, if you don't want to search through your whole personal wiki, you want to search through the writing that's related to your projects, you can just filter out the terms hashtag and then leave that all to the side. Sorry, I need to shut off the oven, which is making a noise. So I don't know, that was just me sort of saying your idea is great and talking it through for myself. But do you find that division like outside of book club? Have you been using that, or do you see?
I'm about to start using it. I'm about to start doing a literature review for a project, so I'm going to start using it in my own vault. we used it in book club, and I thought it was really helpful because I thought it was pretty cool to be able to see we're all reading the same book, but we have lots of different questions about it. So that was really interesting. And then also realizing how another part of coming to terms is realizing that like two authors could be talking about the same thing and just using different words for it. So it's like, when this person says analogical thinking and this person says lateral thinking, are they actually talking about the same thing, or are they talking about a different thing? And that can be really generative regardless of what the answer is.
Yeah, and that's great. That's great. I find especially in what I love about this whole thing, personal knowledge management, is it's just constantly trying to puncture those moments of assumed knowledge where everybody's just saying, yeah, like, lateral thinking, and everyone's nodding, but everyone in the room has a different understanding of it, or doesn't understand it at all and just thinks they do. It's just a piece of jargon sitting in their head. So like constantly bringing it down into the concrete and forcing yourself and others to articulate your terms, that just seems like a really fundamental piece of what this whole thing is about.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to start with the PKM Planet, because I thought it was really useful to say, this is the things that we're actually talking about when we talk about PKM, right?
Definitely. Nice. Okay. Well, cool. So we move on. What was I doing? I was walking you through my kind of poorly organized Obsidian Vault. PKM here this was me like reading around about these things and trying to keep track of stuff as I was learning, right? Like best practices or hotkeys or examples. I did have a question about, so I had a question about how this is organized here, okay? So with respect to, say, okay, let me say for workflows for capture, and again, let's just pretend that whenever I say MOC, I really mean some kind of index, okay? If I want to go look up something about capture workflow, okay? If I write this, if I actually label this as capture workflow, it now sits up here, like away from the workflows MOC, the stuff that starts with W, right? But if I understand this correctly, Obsidian is not about looking through this file structure and trying to have everything related to Obsidian connected here. You kind of have to like let go of that top-down file structure part of you that wants it to all be there, because the way that these links happen is happening elsewhere. It's happening through tags. It's happening through these site keys. Is that correct? That I just kind of need to not worry about the fact that capture workflow is listed up here and workflows is listed down here. Do you follow?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, basically you're talking about like there's two different main ways to navigate Obsidian. One is using the file explorer sidebar, and the other one is, like I said, there's lots of different ways. You can use the graph, you can just search for your note, you can click through links, and there's plugins that help with that. So it kind of depends on how you think you're going to use it. So my kind of like in-between approach is anything that I know that I want to access, I just put a 0 in front of it or something, so that way it shows up at the top. So like I might put a 0 in front of all my MOCs in this folder, so they show up at the top if I do want to browse it. Because I do like browsing with the file explorer, but it depends. Like when I'm browsing my Zettelkasten, I'm not using the file explorer. But for something like this, I might want to use the file explorer. So that's the compromise, is just put your MOCs at the top and then use your MOCs to navigate, right? Or you search for your MOCs, but it's a little easier.
And then something like this, next steps. In your world, this is something that lives in para. Right? This is me saying things that I've come across that I want to do, right? Figure out collection process. We're doing that today, but this is actually something that lives for you. This would be a fleeting note. Like, let's say I'm on the run and I think I really need to work on my collection process. I take this fleeting note, it goes into the to process folder if I'm on the run. And then when I'm doing my processing, it will move into Para as a project I want to work on.
I think for me, I do have a PKM next steps specific note, and that one's called like possible Obsidian improvements. I think it's in an area. So for this one, because this is not, at least for me, a lot of the stuff that I want to do is not like time sensitive. Once something's really time sensitive, I would probably like make a project for it and either put it in Obsidian and or in OmniFocus so that I would actually like do it. But like the possible Obsidian improvements, that's just like a laundry list of all stuff that it would be cool to do this sometime. So I have it available, but I'm not necessarily actively implementing anything from it.
That really helps me understand the difference between project and area. It's just time sensitive or not. You know, they're both things in action in my life, but one is like one day I'm sitting around on a Sunday, I want to use Obsidian better. And the other is by next Thursday, I've got to do this. Or
exactly.
Okay, that's super helpful. And then projects that will somehow become part of my new Para life, ideally. And then templates has moved up to admin. And I was playing with just a few versions of it and hadn't really decided definitively on anything. Okay, so let's see. Like I said, am interested in just kind of copying you for the time being. Some of this, I'm very happy to go back and watch the recording, so you don't have to walk me through absolutely every little thing. But I think for the purposes of maybe we go straight into the Obsidian shortcuts. Does that seem like
let's set up I imagine that will be the hardest part to do, is setting up the shortcuts. I think I hope the instructions for setting up the templater are good, but if not, we could go over those too. Okay, all right. So I think there might be something going on with the set variable. It should just say file path in there. If you go up, you click on that one. It should just say file path, like file kappa path. Yeah, it should just say that. Okay, good.
I should say, I was trying to figure this out, knowing nothing about any of this. So
you probably just changed some stuff. That's fine. I'm just looking at mine. Okay. So basically,
install an update of Keyboard Maestro to 10.0.2. Is that necessary for this?
Ask it to remind you later.
Cool.
Okay. So let's talk about what the file path is. So remember, for me, I have like fleeting notes to process, and then the stuff between the I'm totally blanking on the name of that symbol. The ICU date time stuff, that is basically a variable. So that's where I get the 12-digit time from. So
nice, and it just automatically puts it in there.
It automatically puts that in for you. So what you'll want to do is when you look at your vault, you want to say, okay, how do you have it structured? If you structure it exactly as mine, then you can just leave it the same. But otherwise, you see every time it has a /, that's basically a new directory.
So let's do it as yours, since I'm, generally speaking, I'm going to try to use that for the beginning. And if I want to make changes, I will.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so then that should just set it to variable file path. Okay, so that should all be good. And then template is basically the name of the template. So if you scroll down, that's just the name of that. And then it filters it. Okay. And then the next thing is the open URL. So I think that should be left alone.
I don't think I touched it.
Okay, good. And then, so you can decide whether or not you, okay. So I did something which I shouldn't have done, which is basically remember you had said you had a hard time finding the vault. The vault is in the URL. I should have put that as a variable, but I didn't. So if you look in the URL, you see where it says like Obsidian Advanced URI Vault equals. Yep. See how mine says iCloud?
Mm-hmm.
We need to change that to whatever the name of your vault is. And I think this is the thing that you had the question about, like what the name of the vault is, right?
Nothing. So is this the name of my vault, Zettelkasten?
I think so. So if you go to the settings button in the bottom left, it's not that one. The open vault, it's like the top.
Sorry. So
go up to, that one.
Open another vault?
Yeah. So then you see on the left how that's the name. So we just confirmed, right? So it's called Zettelkasten. So that's the name of your vault.
Great.
So now if we go back You
But
just want to change iCloud. Just the part where it says iCloud.
iCloud. Oh, not and file path.
Yeah, not in file path. So basically, that's an argument, and vault equals, and then the ampersand file path equals is for the file path, and there's a bunch of other stuff. Right. So basically, what this should do is when you hit the hotkey, it should open Obsidian in your specific vault. It should create that file with that file path. It should make a template, and then it's going to resize the window. So you can choose whether or not you want that or not. You can delete that. You can leave that in. I use that just because, like, if I'm like taking notes on a video or something, it's nice to.
Yeah. No, that's really smart, I think. So shall I try it? Is there anything I need?
The last thing you need to do is you need to make sure you have the advanced URI plugin installed. So did you install that one yet?
I believe I did, but let's just take a quick look.
Let's double check.
Again, advanced URI.
Okay, click on that. Okay, I think this should be fine.
Okay, so we're going to try it. Is that what we're going to do? This is exciting. This is like sitting around at mission control, seeing if the rocket's going to land on Mars.
See what happens.
So, oh,
it works.
Look at that. Okay, sexy. That's the name of this note. We're going to go into, where are we going? We're going
it's in fleeting notes, 30-fleeting notes.
Of course, 30-fleeting notes to process. Nice. So this is the timestamp. So let's say that wait, this is interesting. Why is, as I click around now, oh, sorry. Okay, great. So to process, we click on this note, sexy. Boom. Okay. That is very exciting. And I can do that any old place in my computer. Like I'm looking at the music and I go this, and suddenly it brings me over. Okay.
Yep.
Now, is it correct that you were saying you sometimes bring it down as like a lower screen, but it's not doing that for me? Is there a reason that I not act?
Do you have a full screen?
Oh, I do. I'm doing full screen.
Try it with it not full screen and see if it works. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So that's useful. If you're in full screen, it'll just bring you to the full screen, but if not, it'll just throw it up. And then you can play with kind of how big.
Yeah, you can experiment with that. I did mine based on my desktop, so size, so you can experiment with that.
Okay, taking a quick note on the Zoom call, and then it's done. And we're back into, I don't know why I was in music, but okay, great. That's very exciting. Boom. So that worked.
Yeah, so the iOS one is basically the same. Now you know. Go ahead.
For all non-programming types out there, those of you who want to use the shortcut, you need to go in to Keyboard Maestro and look at the little place that said originally iCloud and enter the name of your vault, which you can find, just to review for those who are very poor at programming and want to figure this out, by going into Obsidian, clicking open another vault, and whatever the name is there, that's what needs to replace the word iCloud. And then all of this, once you've done the download, will work like a charm.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And it's the same in the iOS shortcut. The iOS shortcut kind of has the same layout.
Add shortcut. I'm adding. I believe I've already downloaded the advanced Obsidian URI plugin.
All right. You have to download it on mobile as well. Yeah.
Yep, I've already done that. Okay, so I've got it. I've got the Obsidian inbox sitting there. So shall I click on that guy?
So what you want to do is I'm going to go back out. You want to click like the 3 dots in the top right corner.
Yep, clicking the 3 dots. Okay, I'm into the kind of like command zone. So.
Yeah, and so there's like a lot of stuff in there, and you basically scroll down until you find the text box that says iCloud.
Yep, and it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Zettelkasten.
Yep.
That's annoyingly simple.
It's just hard to actually do it. I think now that we have this video, it'll be much easier to show people where to go.
So do I push the play button at the top here? There's like a little play symbol.
Yeah, yeah, that works. That's basically like the debug mode. So if you just exit out and then tap it, that works too. Okay, so you have like the done button all the way on the right. And then so to the left of that, you have this thing that looks like a bunch of different options. You hit that. And then the first option is add to home screen.
And then I click add.
And so now it'll be on your home screen and you can move it around and put it wherever you want.
Okay, so just to put it to use, I click Obsidian Inbox, and basically that's the version of pulling up that quick note, right?
Yep.
And if I wanted, I could figure out a way to shortcut this with some kind of finger swipe that brings it up as well. But that would be a sort of a separate exercise, right?
Yeah, I haven't done that. I just have it on my home screen.
That's easy enough. Okay, so I'm just gonna do our classic note, sexy. Done. Allow Obsidian Inbox to open Obsidian. Allow.
Yeah, I would do always allow next time it comes up. That way it doesn't keep asking you.
And let's see. Okay, so sorry, Obsidian Inbox. That's a good point. Done. No file is open. Create new file, go to file, see recent files is what it's saying. So do I need to do some, sorry, so I click on Obsidian Inbox.
Yep.
Oh God, okay, anyway, I'm clicking on that, I don't need to show you. And then it brings up that nice little guy up top.
Yep. Oh yeah, so just enter some text.
I enter some text and I click done and it brings, oh, and it happened.
It worked.
We have mission control. Okay. Very nice. Okay, that's really exciting. I'm very excited about this. Okay, so are you willing to go with me into stage 2, the templator?
Yeah, I think we can do that and then wrap up. So basically, the templator scripts are used. Basically, what it does is it runs JavaScript on your local computer in order to archive, move, or trash. And so you basically need to download these 2 files. And the archive move is actually the same file. So basically, you download 2 files.
Am I clicking? I'm on your page here on my laptop. Am I clicking on the templator?
So you see like to the right, there's archive/moving and trashing. Yep. Open those in a new tab each.
Okay, yep. I just did so. Oops, did I? I failed to do so.
You just hit back on one of them.
Yeah, here we go. And we open the next one in a new tab. Okay, we are there.
Okay, so now what you want to do is you need to copy the contents. So I think you can usually just drag and click to copy the contents of this file. So make sure you click from the beginning.
Like,
and then, yeah.
Like from the and just kind of head on down?
Yep.
Did you program this or you did this with your hacker collaborator, TFT?
Yeah, TFT hacker coded almost all of it. I think I might have made a minor modification to one of them. Yeah, so then Control C or Command C. And then now we'll go into Obsidian and we'll make a new file.
So that's literally just new note. Sorry, is that new note you mean or?
Yeah, new note.
Okay. And drop all of that
and paste
into the note?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Did that.
So let's go to the top. Which one was this? Was this the archive or the trash?
This was the archive, I believe.
Okay, so you'll want to name the note. I called it archive and process next file. You can call it whatever you want, whatever will help you remember it.
Reasonable. Okay.
Okay. And so you want to put this in your templater folder, wherever that is.
Right, which will be, I already made it. Okay, so just move that note to the templater folder.
Yep.
Where did I put that? Do you know how to quickly find out where you put a note when you've made it? Do you see where
Control O, Command O, maybe?
Command O. I'm sorry, I'm so bad at... Okay, sorry. How do you go back? Do you know the shortcut to go back to the note you were just previously on?
Oh, I have a back at the top of mine. I think you don't have a history in yours. You could just go do Command O and then we'll find it. We'll search for it.
Oh, of course. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, great.
And there you go. Okay, so it's in your fleeting notes. Okay, so just click.
Oh, that should be, yeah.
Click it.
Yep.
And then you can drag it or use the command palette to move it.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Oh, I see. So I'm
just
taking
the whole file. You want to put the file in the templater folder.
Yeah. That's what we're doing. Oh God. Okay.
Cool. Okay. So we've got one there. Let's download the other one.
Great. Yep. So
the trash one.
Here we go. Here's trash. Same process. Yeah.
Yep.
Oops. Okay. Okay, so we're going to call that trash and process next file.
So you can make a new, yeah, there you go. Now it makes a new note right inside the folder. Okay, all right. So we have these two, but we want to also make the move one.
Mm-hmm. Is that back to the website
So
here?
basically what you want to do, go back to the Obsidian. Basically what we want to do is make a new note in the templater.
Okay.
Basically we want to duplicate the archive and process next file. So if we go to the archive one,
yep,
we can just Command A, copy.
Yep.
Paste.
Okay. There.
And then call this one move and process next file. Okay, so now let's go back to the archive.
Yep.
And basically now what we need to do is we need to set a variable that will be the archive folder that name that we want to use. So basically you want to scroll down to where you see a line that says let archive path equal. So go up. Keep going. It's basically towards the top.
Okay. Yep. It says null right now.
It says null right now. So basically you want to start with single quote. Or basically delete the null. Yeah, delete null.
Yep.
Oh wait, sorry, go down. So that's the comment. Yeah, that's the one you want down there, right? Yep. So delete that.
Yep.
And then say like 2 single quotes. So that basically, yeah. So now we want to write our string inside this. And so the archive path is whatever path you want. I'll paste you what I have written in between there. So you can just use the same structure for right now.
Great.
So,
this is going into the chat.
Yeah, I'll paste it in. There you
go. Okay, cool. So that is going to go right there. Yep.
Yep. Okay. And okay, so now we have all the templates, but now we need to download and install Templater if you haven't already done that.
No. So is that in a settings thing over here?
Yeah, it's a community plugin.
Cool.
So browse.
Oops, am I not doing that? Where's oh, browse. Yeah.
Browse.
Great.
Install.
And then enable.
Enable. Okay, so now we need to go to the settings and we need to set to show it which folder we've stored our templates in.
So here, templater?
Mm-hmm.
Or okay.
Okay, so you see where it says template folder location? If you start typing templater, we should find the folder. So yeah, it's 3.
This guy?
And just click it. Yep, so now it knows which folder to go to. I don't think we need to change any of the other settings, but if we have an issue, we can always come back to it. Okay, so basically now templater is enabled. It knows which folder to look for the templates in. Okay,
yep.
So let's like go to process folder and like make a bunch of notes just so we can test the workflow.
Great.
Oh, you already got a bunch in there. Yeah, so like click on the first one. Okay, yeah. And so now we haven't assigned shortcuts to these yet, but we will go back and do that once we've tested that everything works. So basically what we want to do now is we want to go to the command palette. So Command P.
Command P.
And type templater.
Yep.
Templater. Create new note from template. I think that's the right one. Yep.
Let's click it.
Yeah. And then pick one. So do we want to archive it? Do we want to move it? Or do we want to trash it?
This is me just arbitrary. This is
we're just pick one.
Pick one. Okay, let's archive this guy.
Does not look like that worked properly. Interesting.
It does not look like it does.
Okay, let's set up the shortcuts hotkeys then, because I haven't actually done it this way before. So maybe if we set up the hotkeys first, it'll work. Sure. So let's install another plugin. It's called Hotkeys for Templates.
Great. So back to community plugins, browse. Maybe that's a space there.
Hotkeys for templates.
Oops, for templates. That was a
there you go.
Yeah.
Install. Enable. Okay, now so we need to go to the settings for this one.
Yep.
Scroll up a little bit.
Up.
Okay, so basically we can make a template for each hotkey for each of these. So we want to toggle all those on.
Yep.
At the top. Okay, so that's good. So basically now we're telling hotkeys for templates, we would like to assign hotkeys. We actually have to go to the hotkeys menu to actually assign them. So scroll up on the left and go to hotkeys, click. And now you can filter for templater.
Got it.
And you see insert from templater. So now we need to assign hotkeys. So I assigned option A to archive. So you can try that. Just
try that. Yeah, that sounds
great. So click the key button. Yeah. And then type the key.
Yep.
And then for move, I did option M.
This is all making a lot of sense.
And then for that one, I did option D. I think option T didn't work for some reason. So I did option D.
Well, then let's. Do you think it wouldn't work on mine as well, or is it?
I think it might be conflicting with another shortcut, but I don't know if you have that or not. But so you can just do option D for now.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see if this works better. So basically now instead of doing the command palette thing, we're just going to hit the key. So let's go back to the note that we were just looking at.
And we're going to try to archive it. So we're going to do option A. Is that correct?
Yeah. There we go. That works.
Boom. Okay, and now just
because of the JavaScript.
Okay, cool. I'm sitting in this note. I'm gonna trash it. Looks like it's gone.
Boom.
I'm going to do one last thing, which is that I'm going to option emit. And this is something very important to me that I'm going to put in my future para system, which currently doesn't exist.
Boom.
And it just there. Wow. It's like magic. Honestly, you programming MIT people, you just live and breathe this stuff. But for me, 3 hotkeys. This is as advanced as I've ever gotten on my laptop. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, it started making me appreciate how complicated it actually is to set it up the first time. But then once it's working, it's really easy to use.
Super. Yeah. And I use Gmail hotkeys. So this will just be, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you can adjust the hotkeys later if you decide you want to change them now that you know what they are. And I think there is a plugin, I don't remember which one it is, but there is a plugin that shows you when there's conflicts with hotkeys. It might be called like hotkeys plus plus. And that way it tells you if you choose a hotkey that conflicts with something else rather than it just not working.
This is really cool. And I imagine people out there with my level of knowledge also might have tried this and failed. So I hope this does open up the beauty of your shortcuts to a wider Obsidian population.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll definitely share this on the forum and on YouTube.
Look, you have been obscenely generous with your time. I really appreciate it. You've given me a huge amount to think about, and I'm excited. Yeah, I've certainly gotten everything and more I hope to get out of the call, and I've got lots of things to go play with now.
This is great. Yeah, I feel like I learned a lot too, because I think one of the things I'm trying to do is to try to take all the thoughts into my brain and kind of distill them the way that we did with that Jamboard. So I think that was really useful for me as well. And it was really helpful to learn from your point of view as someone who's excited about using PKM, what some of the challenges are, but also like a lot of the strengths, right? Like your project sounds so cool. And so I'm really excited to see where you go with it.
Thank you. Well, I will try not to harass you every time I have a question about PKM, but may be loosely in touch about something I'm excited about or some question or who knows.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, in the meantime, thanks for your time. It's really great to meet you. It makes me want to just like get involved in some of these forums. I feel like there's a lot of people out there trying to do what I'm trying to do, and it's fun to meet. You're my first PKM live conversation here.
Yeah, you should for sure. The Obsidian Discord is very active. So there's a lot of people talking there. And sometimes they do live events. So like some of the notes in my Obsidian Vault are from live events that people have done. There's also Rome Book Club. And actually there's going to be an Obsidian Book Club as well. So there's a lot going on.
Cool. That's very, yeah. This makes me want to get more involved in actual human. I think I want to use it for personal knowledge management, not social knowledge management, but the idea of like having more of these kinds of productive conversations. I don't know, this was very generative for me. So I will check all that stuff out. And I don't know, see you at a book club. See you somewhere around.
Sounds great.